Livet i Huambo går vidare. Det går vidare trots 25 år av inbördeskrig och trots att UNITA-gerillan för tredje gången försöker att inta Angolas näst största stad.
Refugees have flocked to Huambo. They occupy every empty building, every available inch of floor. Almost 100,000 are thought to have arrived here. Dominga Canrida came to Huambo with her family. They had to walk for 2 days to avoid UNITA soldiers.
Quer andar ajudar lá a dar comida são que as irmãs. Agora não estão a dar mais desde que receberam dia 30 até hoje. Nós não recebemos.
Angola's government has invested everything in fighting this war. They have nothing to offer the refugees. Huambo's displaced are hemmed in by war. They are dependent on foreign aid, but aid comes slowly these days.
Huambo is slightly isolated, so there is no food came in or not enough food came in. So situation continues like this, and 1-2 months perhaps people would have nothing to eat, and well, that's a really food crisis, of course.
It is shameful what is happening in Huambo. The international peacekeeping force can do nothing but stand by and look. There is no longer any peace to observe. UN soldiers have no mandate or equipment to try and separate MPLA and UNITA soldiers.
We have not succeeded in, I will say, crossing the finish line. War has resumed because UNITA refused to disarm, and finally the government decided to recourse to force. Slowly and slowly, war is dragging us into its own logic.
The consensus seems to be that it is time for the UN to leave Angola. After almost 9 years here, and with $1.5 billion spent, they have failed to create the conditions for peace and disarmament. At the height of UN involvement, more than 7,000 peacekeepers were deployed here. Today there are just over 1,000. For the Angolans, it is a bitter disappointment.
A UNITA apanhou jovens nas aldeias, são esses que apresentou. A MONUA, coitado, a MONUA, como eram estrangeiros na sua maioria, aceitaram aquilo que a UNITA foi apresentando.
Last time the war broke out, at the end of 1992 after the elections, the government hired the notorious South African mercenaries, Executive Outcomes. They trained troops and most likely took part in the fighting against UNITA. This gave the government the upper hand and forced UNITA to agree to a peace plan in 1994. Now the government troops are ill-disciplined and are losing ground to UNITA. It has been reported that UNITA is now using mercenaries itself.
Nunca uma guerra termina com derrota total do adversário, do inimigo. Há luta, sim senhor, há batalhas, mas sempre no fim, para terminar, é necessário sentar, conversar, negociar. Para dizer que também nós não acreditamos que o tiro a tiro traga paz totalmente. Mas o tiro a tiro é necessário, às vezes, para enfraquecer o teimoso.
Most observers believe that there can be no military solution to the Angolan conflict, but neither the government nor UNITA is willing to compromise. Too much is at stake for them to put down their arms. Now, no young men are safe. At any given time, they can be forcibly conscripted to fight on either side, in the evil circle of war that surrounds the country.
It's wrong to think that the role of the UN is to stay at any cost. It's wrong. The role of the MONUA, the role of the UN is to have a mandate. If the mandate can be fulfilled, yes, we have to stay for that purpose. If the UN cannot perform the mandate, what for?
In the wake of the fighting, the situation for civilians is rapidly deteriorating. The international aid agencies here are now diverting all their efforts into emergency provisions. They have to watch while their efforts are destroyed and long-term development projects fall by the wayside.
Wir haben gesehen, dass etwas will passieren. Das war mehr und mehr Traffic in die Flughafen hier in Huambo, mehr und mehr Truppen sind gekommen seit September. Aber immer wir waren optimistisch und wir haben gedacht, nie etwas will passieren.
But it did happen. Once the Swiss were the biggest employer in Huambo. In this old furniture factory, they produced parts for bridges. But the war has made bridges redundant. Nobody knows how long the battles will last. And so long as there is war, there is little point in investing in development.
Das ist sehr traurig für uns, aber ich glaube, unser Problem ist ganz klein. Die Problem, das ist von den Leuten vom Huambo, unsere Mitarbeiter und so, das ist für them, das ist ganz tragisch.
The bridge at Kalima is abandoned. Built with Swiss aid, the bridge is an important supply route for Huambo. But renewed fighting has meant renewed mine laying. This road, and scores of others, are now best avoided. Kalima is just another ordinary village. But if Savimbi's troops make it here, they can shell Huambo's airport, which lies just 15 kilometers away. And if they take the airport, conquering the entire city will be easy. The people of Kalima know that their town is strategically important. The few villagers here remain here tell a British demining team about the new mine victims and the bombshells they found nearby. Only 2 weeks earlier, this truck drove over an anti-tank mine on the road to Huambo. The truck was carrying 30 farmers to the local market. 14 of them were killed.
Quando o carro levantou, depois nos bateu no chão. Na tal hora só reconheci a minha cunhada. Ela já estava caiu no outro lado, já estava coisa, já morreu na própria hora. E quando saio daí também, corro na minha cunhada. Já lhe encontrei que já dormiu, as tripas já saíram fora.
Huambo's hospital is crowded with landmine victims and the lucky few amongst those wounded in the crossfire who make it to the isolated city. This is the only city in the province with a working surgical theatre, but it has few resources or drugs. The fighting takes place in the country surrounding Huambo, but you can still hear the shelling and shooting, and sometimes there is smoke on the horizon. The last checkpoint on the way to the front is manned by soldiers and police. The few trucks coming back from the war carry soldiers and some civilians. They are lucky enough to receive a friendly greeting. Government troops have already cleared them. Huambo is a symbol for the never-ending Angolan civil war. They believe they can make more gains with bullets than diplomacy. Their deadlock condemns the population to war after a quarter of a century of fighting for power.
As pessoas que estão envolvidas nessa guerra, muitas vezes também têm os seus fracassos, enfim, mas há sempre alguns interesses. E não para defender realmente a população.
The Angolan people's interests have been ignored for a long time. Generation after generation have had nothing but conflict surrounding them. For them, there is no prospect of peace, no hope for a future without war.
Aqui não há reserva.